Hey guys, JT Shaver here, and today we're going to be looking at one beast of an LED light. If you want to keep up with my reviews on the latest camera and lighting gear, make sure you hit subscribe now and hit the bell notification so you don't miss any videos in the future. If you've been looking for an LED panel but you want to skip over all the budget options, the D&O Lighting 180 watt bicolor LED panel might be the perfect fit for you. At 180 watts, you would expect a light like this to be nice and bright, but how does it compare to budget lights, and why would you spend extra money on a light like this? There's a lot to like about this light, but there are some quirks with it that you should know before considering adding this to your kit. Let's start with some of the positive aspects of this light. The first thing that I look at whenever I review a light is the quality of the carrying case. The carrying case is pretty nice, but it's not overkill. But you're not going to damage the light unless you're treating the case like you're an airport baggage handler. It has higher density foam than some of the other lights that I've seen, so that just makes the case a little bit smaller and less bulky. It also has some lettering on the outside telling you exactly what's inside the case, and that might seem like a pretty small deal, except when you have a ton of different lights, it's nice to be able to just look at the case and immediately know what's inside. This light also has really nice diffusion, especially compared to some of the cheaper LED panels, so it doesn't suffer from the checkered or striped shadows that some other panel lights do. That also makes it better for more delicate work like portrait close-ups or product photography and things like that. It'll give you nicer shadows, better catch lights, and just more diffused light overall. For how big and bright this light is, it's actually a little bit lighter than I would have expected, but it doesn't feel cheaply built, but I would call it adequately built. It's not some huge tank of a light, so that just makes it easier to handle and less top heavy when you have it on top of a light stand. Like I said, this is a bicolor light with variable temperature from 3200 Kelvin up to 5600 Kelvin. One quirk with this light is that you can't increase the color temperature in even increments of 100 Kelvin. For example, it goes by 200s between 3200 and 3800 Kelvin, then it jumps to 4100 Kelvin and goes by 200s again until 5100 Kelvin, then finally it jumps to 5400 and then 5600. In a practical sense, this is not going to make any difference, but if you're really picky and you think that actually matters, that's something to consider. It has a 120-degree beam angle, so it's nice and wide so you can flood a background, or you can use the barn doors to focus the light a little bit more. The barn doors are removable and it's pretty easy to remove them. They're held in by two little set screws on opposite corners, but if you keep those hand tight, you can take those out anytime without any tools, and then you just pop it out from there. This light is dimmable in 1% increments from 8% up to 100%, so you can use it in really delicate situations or turn it up to 100 when you need a really big floodlight. The dimensions of the panel itself are 16.5 by 12.5 inches, so it's a semi-soft light source. Obviously, the closer you move it to your subject, the softer the light source looks, and since the diffusion on this is so nice, you can get away with doing that. One thing I like about this light is that the yoke is adjustable, so sometimes if you have the barn doors open on a light like this and you want to tip it down a lot, the bottom barn door ends up hitting the stand itself. With this light, you can actually raise the light up in the yoke, and that will just allow you to tip it down at a more severe angle without the barn doors interfering. Another good thing about this light is that the brightness doesn't really change across the color temperature range. So in the middle at 4400 Kelvin, some lights are even brighter than they are at 3200 or 56, but this light is only about 1/10 of a stop brighter at 4400, so I consider that to be the same exposure across the entire color range. That's just nice. In case you're tweaking your colors, you just know that you're not going to have to adjust your exposure once you have it set. This light also has multiple power options, so you can use an AC adapter, or you can throw a V-mount battery on the back, or it also has a DC input on the back. I also have a D&O Lighting brand V-mount battery at 190 watt hours, so that would theoretically let me run this light for just over an hour at 100% brightness. The efficiency of LEDs is pretty linear when you dim it, so that would mean I could run it just over 2 hours at 50%, or close to 4.5 hours at 25%. Obviously, if you have a smaller battery, it'll run for less time, but it is nice not having cords laying around everywhere. It's also worth mentioning that the brightness is the same whether you're using AC power or a battery. The V-mount on the back is really secure, and I like that it's vertical. Some V-mounts are sideways, so if you don't click in all the way, there's a risk that the battery might fall out. Obviously, ideally, you would want to make sure that it's clicked in no matter what light you're using. This light is dead silent because it doesn't have any fans, and there's no ringing or humming sound that comes from the box either. Some of the cheaper lights, sometimes when you turn the dimmer down, you might hear a very slight ringing sound, but this light just doesn't suffer from that whatsoever. There are a couple negative things about this light that are not a big deal to me, but they're worth knowing in case they might be a deal breaker for you. The first thing is that you just can't remove the diffusion panel at all. I started taking some screws out to see if maybe it just was a little bit harder than other lights, but at a certain point I decided to stop because I didn't want to damage the light. The light is nice and bright by itself, but if you wanted to remove the diffusion and try to get a little bit extra exposure, it's just not possible. The remote control itself is really nice and well built, and it works well, except that it uses infrared technology instead of wireless. That means you have to have a direct line of sight between the remote and the back of the light. Now, I really don't use remotes much, and if I do, I'm standing behind the light, so it's not a big deal. But if you're a person that goes around changing light brightness and color temperature from around the room, it's worth noting. One other quirk to this light that I figured would be worth mentioning is the mount on the bottom. So the mount on this is meant to go on a baby pin adapter, which you'll find on a lot of C-stands, and it has 2 little set screws instead of 1 that you might find on a different light. That's good on one hand because if you have a baby pin adapter, you can tighten those set screws and it kind of latches in there and you know it's not going to come off the stand. So it's better for a baby pin adapter, but it's not any worse for a regular adapter if you have a smaller light stand. So it's just worth mentioning. To give you a better idea of how bright this light is in a practical situation, I'm going to measure it with my light meter against a few other lights, including the Neewer 660 LED light panel, the Godox SL60W, and the Godox FV200, which is the same brightness as the Godox SL200. All the measurements are going to be from 1 meter at ISO 100, and I'm not using any reflectors on the COB lights. And I am using the diffusion panel on the Neewer light just to kind of give it the same quality of this light. So the Neewer 660 LED panel gives me f4 at 1/15 of a second. The Godox SL60W gives me f4 and 4/10 at 1/30 of a second. The Godox FV200 gives me f4 and 3/10 at 1/125 of a second. And the D&O Lighting 180 watt LED panel gives me f4 at 1/60 of a second. So this light is 2 stops brighter than the Neewer LED panel, and it's a half a stop brighter than the SL60W. You also have to keep in mind that this is a much softer light source compared to something like a COB light with the Godox SL60W. So with that light, you'd have to add some extra diffusion to make it as soft as this, and that would probably knock another 1 to 2 stops off. This light is 1 1/3 stop darker than the FV200, but again, that's a COB light and you have to add some extra diffusion to that, which brings the exposure down a bit. Overall, I think this light is best suited for things like interviews or when you have to work in really close quarters and you don't have room to add a whole lot of diffusion to your light. If you're looking for more control over your light, a COB might be better because you can add a softbox and a grid or a Fresnel focusing attachment and really focus your light in exactly where you want it to go. If you're interested in picking up this light or any others that I mentioned in this video, I'll have affiliate links in the description. It doesn't cost you anything extra, but it does help me create more videos like this. Leave a comment and let me know what video you want to see next. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.